rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we are going to take the second part of the novel Robinson Crusoe. Before that, I will ask you some questions, so try to answer these with me. The first one: who advises Crusoe not to leave England? Who advises Crusoe not to leave England? I will give you three options. The first one: his brother, his father, or his friend. So again, who advises Crusoe not to leave England? We have three options. The first one: his brother, B, his father, C, his friend. Yes, that's right. So we have his father advises him not to leave England. This is the right answer. Another one: what does Crusoe bring from the coast of Africa? What does Crusoe bring from the coast of Africa? A, some sugar, B, gold dust, C, cotton. Which one of these? Yes, that's right. Gold dust. Before his second voyage to Africa, Crusoe leaves 200 pounds with whom? His father, B, his companions, widow, C, his mother. So the right answer: he leaves 200 pounds with his companion's friend. That's right. Let's have another question about the previous lecture. For how long does Crusoe stay a slave in Africa? What's the period of staying for a slave in Africa for Crusoe? For how long does Crusoe stay a slave in Africa? A, for only 1 year, B, 2 years, C, 10 years. Which one of these three answers? Yes, for only 2 years. Okay. Now let's start with today's lecture. So we have taken, in the previous lecture, we took analysis of Robinson Crusoe, the first part. Now let's see part 2. We are going to see Crusoe in the isolated island. So we are going to start with introduction about that. Crusoe finds himself alone on the island. He describes how he manages his life on this unpopulated place. So this is a kind of introduction for this lecture. So we can see Crusoe on this land or isolated island. He describes how he manages his life on his unpopulated place. He couldn't see any person on this island. It's a kind of establishing the essential values of a human being, such as these which are related to civilization. So we are going to start from the early beginning of civilization with Crusoe. He tries to be civilized from the beginning of his life on this island. Crusoe builds his shelter using trees and simple facilities around him. He cultivates surrounding land. He has some animals that he domesticates through time. Also, he faces the danger of some animals and coming cannibals. So we have a lot of adventures through the life of Robinson Crusoe in this island. There is a great amount of description for his adventures in the island. Now let's start with the early beginning of his stay on this island. Crusoe finds himself on the island. Crusoe is lucky because he is the only survivor. He is practical from the early beginning, as we have said. He wants to get things and supplies from the destroyed ship. He doesn't stay still. He is practical. He starts to bring some supplies from the destroyed ship to his place or to his island. When he reaches the ship and finds most of the provisions unspoiled, most of the provisions and objects are okay, so he wants to get these provisions into his island in order to, for example, if he wants to eat, yes, he has to bring some food from the destroyed ship. Some objects, he can carry them from the ship to his island in order to use them in the future. He thinks of making a raft to carry these things to the island. So he starts to think of building a raft, a kind of wooden, yes, plates together, put together in order to carry some objects on them. He carries food, clothes, ammunition, and arms, and some tools. Crusoe is aware of the tide and wind while using his raft. Now he is cautious and he is careful about the danger of the sea. He has now a good experience of navigation after he has sailed for many times. So he becomes experienced and he knows a lot of information about the sea. He is also aware of the real danger of sailing after he has faced the death several times by himself. So he faces death all over his life. So he is also aware of the real danger of sailing and navigation after he has faced the death several times. And we can remember the storm which has destroyed his ship before reaching the island. So he has faced death by himself. Crusoe finds a dog and 2 cats. So these are the living creatures. We have only 1 dog and 2 cats with Crusoe. So Crusoe finds a dog and 2 cats on the ship. He carries the cats. The dog swims to the shore and becomes his servant. Later we are going to explain this relationship between the dog and Crusoe and the expression which is he deals with the creatures and animals, especially animals and any creature, as his servant. Crusoe says that the dog was a trusty servant to me many years. I wanted nothing that he could fetch me nor any company that he could make up to me. I only wanted to have him talk. So he wants him to talk to him. So we have something or a requirement for social or something in conversation. Again, this quotation is very important because we can sense lack of social contact. So the dog was a trusty servant to me many years. I wanted nothing that he could fetch me, nor any company that he could make up to me. I only wanted to have him talk to me, but that wouldn't do. So it's impossible to have a dog, and it's very impossible to have a talking dog. Crusoe addresses the dog as being his friend. He uses he, the pronoun he, for this animal. Instead of using the pronoun it, he deals with this creature, the dog, as a human being, and he addresses this dog as he, not it. It appears that Crusoe deals with other creatures as his servants. Again, we can sense that. So Crusoe deals with other creatures, whether they are human or animal, as his servants. He stands as a superior man most of the time, even with animals such as the dog. He has this tendency of enslaving animals before humans. We have a kind of slavery between Crusoe and other creatures, so we can sense that from the early beginning in his stay on the island. He keeps going daily to the ship. He says, I had been now 13 days on shore and had been 11 times on board the ship. But preparing the 12th time, this time I discovered 3 razors and 1 pair of large scissors with something or a dozen of good knives and forks. So these are the objects that Crusoe has found on the ship. We have forks, we have a lot of, or 3 razors, 1 pair of large scissors, and they are very useful for him on the island. He also finds some money and gold. He says, I found about 36 pounds value in money, some European coin, some Brazil, some pieces of 8, some gold, and some silver. So he has found some gold, money, and silver. In the next morning, the ship sinks and disappears. So after that, the ship sinks and disappears. He wants to hide his objects, so he starts discovering the island. So now he wants to see other sides of the island and discover whether there are other human beings or not. He doesn't know whether this island is inhabited or not. So he doesn't know anything about this island. He says, my next work was to view the country and seek a proper place to store my goods and secure them from whatever might happen. So we have another mission for Crusoe. He wants to hide these objects in a safe place. Again, to store my goods. So to store them, to hide them in a safe, secure place. My next work, again, this is the next mission. After carrying some objects from the ship into the island, we have another mission, which is saving these objects and making them secure and safe. So we have, my next work was to view the country and seek a proper place to store my goods, to secure them from whatever might happen. He begins to look for a better place to secure himself from wild animals, sun, or any attack. He states that, I had many thoughts of the method how to do this. So he has many opinions about making his shelter and creating his home. He states that, again, I had many thoughts of the method how to do this and what kind of dwelling to make. Whether I should make me a cave in the earth. So he was in between 2 kinds of shelter. We have a cave in the earth or a tent upon the earth. Upside or underground, we have cave and we have a tent. In short, I resolved upon both. So he wants to make a cave and a shelter upside the earth, which is a kind of tent or hut. He finds a place. It's a little high near the sea, but there isn't fresh water nearby. He doesn't have any fresh water near this place. It is very high and very good for him, but he doesn't have enough fresh water near him. He decides to look for another place. According to him, this place should be. So he puts 4 conditions for his place. The first condition, it must be near fresh water. Crusoe needs fresh water near him. The second condition, it must be a shelter from heat of the sun. So it must be a shelter from the heat of the sun. The third condition, it must be safe and secure from dangerous animals and people. So it must be safe and secure. The fourth one, it must be near the sea in order to see other ships and in order to have a view. You can see a view to the sea in order to see any ship from this position. So it must be near the sea. Crusoe takes all these points and conditions into his consideration in finding and building his shelter. He takes into his consideration the four conditions: to be safe, to be near the sea, to be secure, as we said, to be safe or secure, and we have it must be a shelter from the sun near the sea, shelter available of some water near him, and we have the four again: near fresh water, a shelter from the heat, safe and secure, and the last one, near the sea. He builds a fence around his shelter. It takes a lot of time and efforts, but it's very strong that no beast can get into or over it. So again, he builds a kind of wall or fence around his place in order to protect him from beasts, from any dangerous animal or creature around him. He makes a cave behind his shelter. He takes the gunpowder. You can see this. He takes the gunpowder out of his shelter after seeing the lightning. You know lightning. We have lightning from the sky, and it can cause fire. Since it can catch fire, he has logical thinking. He keeps the gunpowder in safe place. Also, he doesn't waste all the gunpowder on shooting animals. He uses traps to catch animals. So, Crusoe is logical in these situations. He doesn't spare all the gunpowder on shooting animals and hunting. Also, he keeps this dangerous material away from his tent in order not to catch fire. So we can sense he is logical and he is smart. He makes his calendar also. We can see again he makes his calendar as a kind of his civilized characteristic. Crusoe is civilized. He makes his calendar because time is very important to him. He says, after I had been there about 10 or 12 days, it came into my thoughts that I should lose my reckoning of time for want of books. Since I don't have books, this is by Crusoe, since I don't have books, I can lose the sense of time. So he makes his calendar, and we can see he makes his calendar on the cross by scratching by his knife. He says, after I had been there about 10 or 12 days, it came into my thoughts that I should lose my reckoning of time for want of books and pen and ink. He doesn't have books, pens, or ink. Therefore, to prevent this, I cut with my knife, making it into a great cross. In order to follow the dates and time, he scratches the wood by his knife. I set it upon the shore where I first landed. I came on shore here on the 13th or the 30th September 1659. He calls the island as Island of Despair. In his calendar, we can follow that. He calls the island as Island of Despair in his calendar. He is sad. Remember that at the beginning of his stay on the island, he is not happy. He is sad because there are no humans in the island. Nobody has ever lived in this place. He can't see any human being on this island, so he becomes very sad and unhappy. Civilization has no access to such isolated island. He sees his situation from two perspectives. We can sense he has two sides now. We have evil and good. He thinks of evil and good situations altogether, positive and negative situations. Crusoe writes his list of evil and good points about some of his situations to comfort himself. So he starts writing these evil and good things in order to be calm and comfortable. These are some of these evil and good situations. We have comparison between evil and good. Now let's go over these situations together. Let's see the evil first and then good about this situation. The first situation, he writes, I am cast upon a horrible, desolate island, void of all hope of recovery. He is isolated and alone now. This is evil. The good thing about this situation, but I am alive and not drowned. But I am alive and not drowned as all my ship's company were. He can sense that even he is sad, he is lucky. He is the only survivor of this ship. Another situation, I have no clothes to cover me. I don't have any clothes to cover me. He says that. But the good thing about this situation, but I am in a hot climate. The climate in his place is very hot. So the climate is very hot. There is no need for clothes. But I am in a hot climate where if I had clothes, I could hardly wear them. Even if I have clothes, I will not wear these clothes. So we can see I have no clothes, but the climate is what the positive or good thing about this situation. The climate is very hot. Let's see another situation. I am without any defense or means to resist any violence of man or beast. He doesn't have anything to defend himself against any beast or any dangerous creature. The good thing about this situation, but I am cast on an island where I see no wild beasts to hurt me. On the other side, we can sense the good thing. There are no beasts or dangerous animals on this island. At the beginning of his stay on the island, he couldn't see any dangerous animals, as I saw on the coast of Africa. And what if I had been shipwrecked there? You remember his situation in Africa. There were a lot of lions on the coast, and he killed one of these lions and skinned it. He had its skin with him, and he sold that skin to the captain. You remember this. So he is lucky. There are no beasts or dangerous creatures on the island. The first one, he doesn't have gun or pistol with him, but on the other side, the good thing, there are no beasts or dangerous creatures. Let's have the last situation. I have no soul to speak to or relieve me. He has nobody with him. He has no conversation with anybody around him. The good thing, but God wonderfully sent the ship in near enough to the shore, that I have got out as many necessary things as will either supply my wants or enable me to supply myself even as long as I live. He is alone and without any companion with him, but he has the ship beside him or nearby him in order to get these supplies to his place. So we can sense every situation, we can sense evil, but there is something good in this situation. Okay, let's go on. Crusoe makes whatever he needs. He makes table and chair. Whatever he needs, he can manage to make it. So we can, again, Crusoe makes whatever he needs. He makes, for example, a table and chair. He says, I began to apply myself to make such necessary things as I found I most wanted, particularly a chair and a table, for without these I was not able to enjoy the few comforts I had in the world. Table and chair, these objects are very important to a civilized person in order to write, in order to eat. These objects are very important to Crusoe. I was not able to enjoy the few comforts I had in the world. I couldn't write or eat or do several things with so much pleasure without a table. So it's very important to have a table. This is according to Crusoe's opinion. It's his idea. He couldn't eat or write without a table. We can sense civilization in this situation. Crusoe's religious reflection. Now let's see the spiritual side of Crusoe. When the earthquake hits his cave, he is afraid and thinks that he is going to be buried alive. He asks his God to save him. He says, Lord, have mercy upon me. Lord, have mercy upon me. He decides to find another safe place. He remembers that a human being is weak and has no control of his fate. So, any strong human being, finally or at last, is a weak person. He couldn't face fate, so he remembers that human being is weak and has no control of his destiny or his fate. Crusoe becomes ill and suffers from fever. He prays to God again. Another situation. When he is ill, he asks his God to cure him, to save him from his illness. He says, Lord, what a miserable creature am I. If I should be sick, I shall certainly die for want of help. And what will become of me? He is again without any help. There is nobody who may take care of him. He is alone, and if he is ill, certainly he will die. So he asks his God to cure him in order to be healthy again and to get to his business again. Crusoe reveals his spiritual side when he is afraid or weak only. So, he becomes religious and he becomes good creature when he is afraid or weak only. He realizes the power of his God. He also remembers his father's advice. He says, my dear father's words are come to pass. God's justice has overtaken. So again, we have the advice of his father, and we have, as a result of that, God's justice has overtaken me, and I have none to help or hear me. He is alone without any help. So he asks his God in order to save him from his illness and from difficult situation. He remembers his father's words and advice, and as a result of that, he can conclude God's justice. Crusoe decides to discover the island and goes further than before. He wants to see the other sides of the island. He goes with his dog. He finds new kinds of fruits in the island, such as melons upon the ground. So, again, he tries to discover the island. He finds melons upon the ground in great abundance. There are a lot of them. And the grapes upon the trees. There are a lot of grapes. Crusoe catches a parrot and decides to keep it. He names it Paul. This bird is a kind of good company for Crusoe. He teaches the bird some words. Crusoe says, "It followed me like a dog. And as I continually fed it, the creature became so loving, so gentle, and so fond that it became from that time one of my domestics also, and would never leave me afterwards." He finds a creature or a bird or a parrot, and he decides to keep it as his servant or companion, as his dog. He makes a large canoe from a big tree. He spends several months. It's a kind of a small boat. It's a kind of a small boat, canoe. But he doesn't figure out how to get it from the land into the water. He doesn't think of the way he can get the boat or the canoe from island to the sea. It's too late that he has made his calculations. He hasn't thought of the way in which this canoe can be moved to the sea. He thinks of bringing water to the canoe and making the water carry it. He thinks that since it's impossible to carry the boat or the canoe into the sea, he thinks that he can carry water from the sea into the boat in order to get it into the sea. So we have some thinking in this situation, and we can take into our consideration his calculations in the novel. But it is not a good idea, since it needs a lot of time to make a channel. For that sake, he makes another one which is smaller. He needs to make a deep channel of water in order to get the canoe from far place to the sea. So at least he needs a long time to make this channel. He changes his mind and he makes a smaller boat. Crusoe once saw a footprint on the sand. He says, "It happened one day about noon." This is a great quotation. You remember Stevenson says that this scene is one of the greatest scenes in literature. This scene or this quotation is one of the greatest scenes in literature. It happened one day about noon. Going towards my boat, I was exceedingly surprised with the print of a man's naked foot on the shore. So he saw a footprint on the shore, which was very plain to be seen on the sand. It's very clear that this print is for a human being. We are going to analyze this situation later in the third section. Crusoe was afraid. He went to it again to see if there were any more and to observe it. It might not be fancy, but there was no room for that. for there was exactly the print of a foot, toes, heel, and every part of a foot. Again, Crusoe was afraid of this footprint. He went to it again. He went back to the place where he saw the footprint, but it was not a fancy. It was not imagined or from his imagination. He realized that it was true. It was a footprint for a human, but there was no room for that, for there was exactly the print of a foot. Exactly a print for a foot. Toes, heel, and every part of a foot. He had several explanations for this print. Let's see some of these explanations. The first one, this footprint was the work of the devil. This footprint was the work of the devil in order to make Crusoe afraid. The second explanation, it was for one of the cannibals, these creatures or these people who can eat human beings, so it was for one of them. The third explanation, it was his footprint. It was for Crusoe, not for another one. Crusoe wants to take care of his goats, but he is afraid to go outside his shelter. But the goats have to be milked. He doesn't leave his place for 3 days and nights. He doesn't leave his shelter because he is afraid of the footprint and other creatures around him. He also has nothing left to eat. He collects his courage again and leaves his shelter. He realizes that he is not alone on this island. There are other people who come to the island. So he discovers that he is not alone on this island. This is the end of this part. Thank you so much.